AITA for taking off my wedding ring after my wife let her family humiliate me? For years, I thought the price of keeping peace was swallowing one more comment, paying one more temporary bill, and pretending I didn't notice when my wife's family treated me like a guest who had overstayed his welcome. I'm Michael, 39, and I had been married to Lauren, 37, for 8 years when her brother Ryan finally said out loud what everyone had been implying with their actions. I was Lauren's husband when they needed a reliable face at the table, the calm guy who showed up with groceries, helped move furniture, paid the bill without making a scene, and remembered which cousin needed a ride home. But the second I asked for basic respect, I became the outsider who didn't understand family. A normal Sunday for me used to mean checking the fridge before grocery shopping, making sure the auto payments cleared, and leaving Lauren's favorite coffee creamer at the front of the shelf because she hated digging for it in the morning. None of that sounds dramatic, and it wasn't. That was the problem. I had built a marriage out of small, steady things, while Lauren's family had built a habit out of taking those things for granted. When Lauren and I first got married, I actually admired how close her family was. They had a group chat that never slept, weekly dinners where someone was always bringing too much food, and a way of filling a room that made it feel like something important was happening even when people were just arguing about salad dressing. Her mother, Diane, was the kind of woman who could turn a simple dinner into a production without admitting it. Her father, Patrick, was quieter, usually sitting back with one hand around a coffee mug, letting Diane steer the room. Ryan was the loudest one. Lauren's younger brother, 35, was quick with a joke, quick with a favor when the favor cost him nothing, and even quicker to remind everyone that he was figuring things out. Early on, I found him annoying but harmless. He called me spreadsheet because I kept receipts and planned ahead. I called him last minute once, and everyone laughed. Back then, it felt like family teasing. Lauren used to squeeze my knee under the table and whisper, "They're intense, but they love hard." That's just how my family is. I believed her. The first time Ryan asked me for money, it was for a car repair. Nothing huge, but enough that I wanted to know when he could pay it back. He showed up at our place one night with his hoodie half-zipped, smelling like cold air and convenience store coffee, saying his car was making a grinding sound, and he was afraid he would lose his job if he couldn't get it fixed. "I'm not asking for a handout," he said, leaning against the kitchen counter like he belonged there. "Just a bridge." Lauren looked at me with that soft, pleading face she used when she wanted me to say yes before we had actually talked. "It would mean a lot," she said quietly. I asked Ryan for a date. Not because I wanted to embarrass him, but because adults who borrow money should know when they plan to repay it. Ryan laughed. "Man, you make everything sound like a contract." I remember Lauren kicking his sneaker under the table and saying, "Ryan, just answer him." He gave me a vague timeline. I sent the money. He thanked Lauren first. That should have told me something. A month later, when I asked about repayment, Ryan said things were tight. 2 months later, Diane said, "Ryan has had a hard year." 4 months later, Lauren told me I was making it awkward by bringing it up. "It's not about the money," I said one night while we were rinsing dishes. Lauren stacked a plate too hard into the dishwasher. "Then why do you keep talking about it?" "Because he promised to pay it back. He's my brother. And I'm your husband." She looked at me like I had just made the conversation uglier than it needed to be. I know that. But over the next few years, knowing that never seemed to change anything. Ryan's emergencies kept coming. A phone bill that had to be covered before service was cut off. A storage unit he just needed to keep for 1 more month. A car insurance add-on that somehow landed on one of our auto payments because Lauren said bundling it would be cheaper for everyone. Small subscriptions on our card that Ryan swore he forgot to cancel. A few hundred here, a little more there. Always temporary, always urgent, and always somehow rude if I asked too many questions. Then Ryan needed a place to stay. "It'll be a couple of weeks," Lauren told me. I stood in our bedroom while she folded laundry on the bed, making neat piles as if neat piles could make the conversation reasonable. "A couple of weeks, meaning 2 weeks?" She avoided my eyes. "Maybe 3. He just needs to get back on his feet." "Lauren, he has been getting back on his feet since I met him." She stopped folding. "That's mean." "It's true. Both things can be true." Ryan stayed for 3 months. He left takeout containers in the living room, used my charger and never put it back, drank the last of the coffee, and said, "My bad, bro." Like that replaced making more. He watched television too loudly at midnight and acted wounded when I asked him to keep it down. One Saturday morning, I found him eating cereal directly over the sink, milk dripping onto the counter, wearing one of my old sweatshirts. "Relax," he said when he saw my face. "It's not a museum. It is my home," I said. He smirked. There he is. Mr. Terms and Conditions. Lauren heard it from the hallway and said nothing. That was the pattern that eventually wore me down more than the money. Ryan would make the comment, Diane would soften it, Patrick would look uncomfortable but stay quiet, and Lauren would change the subject. Then later, when I brought it up privately, she would explain why I needed to be bigger than the moment. At one family dinner, Ryan told a story about me labeling leftovers in the fridge and ended it with, "That's what happens when you marry in. You think you can organize the whole bloodline." A few people laughed. Diane gave a tiny warning, "Ryan." But she was smiling when she said it. I looked at Lauren. She was tearing her napkin into little pieces under the table, smiling with her mouth, but not her eyes. On the drive home, I said, "You heard him." She stared out the windshield. I did. And I also know he doesn't mean half of what he says. He means enough. She sighed. "You always want me to make everything a confrontation." "No, Lauren. I want you to make one thing a boundary." She didn't answer. She just turned the radio down, even though neither of us had been listening. By the time Ryan made the request that started all of this, I had already learned not to react fast. I had learned to pause, ask questions, and pay attention to who got angry when the questions were reasonable. Ryan came over on a Thursday night. Lauren had made pasta, which should have tipped me off because she only cooked that much on weeknights when she wanted the room to feel warmer than the conversation. Ryan arrived with a folder under his arm and that fake casual energy people have when they have rehearsed looking casual. We ate for maybe 10 minutes before he tapped the folder. "So," he said, "I've got an opportunity." I put my fork down. Lauren didn't look at me. Ryan explained that he needed money for a business deal that had fallen through. The details were muddy. He used words like temporary cash flow, bridge, and just signing as backup. What I understood clearly was that he wanted me either to give him a large amount of money or sign paperwork that could put Lauren and me at risk if he didn't follow through. "How much?" I asked. Ryan named a number that made me lean back in my chair. "No," I said. Lauren's head snapped toward me. "Michael." I kept my voice even. "I'm not signing anything I don't understand. I'm not putting our finances behind another one of Ryan's emergencies without a written plan, a repayment schedule, and full transparency." Ryan laughed once, sharp and offended. "You hear this? Full transparency. I'm your brother-in-law, not some guy off the street. That should make honesty easier. Family doesn't need a receipt for every favor. Then family can stop asking for favors that look like liabilities." Lauren pushed away from the table. "You embarrassed me." I looked at her. "I protected us." "No," she said, her voice tight. "You protected your money." Ryan raised both hands like he was the reasonable one. "Forget it." I knew this was going to be a whole presentation. "Good," I said. "Then we're done." But of course, we weren't done. After Ryan left, Lauren paced the kitchen while I packed leftovers into containers. The house smelled like garlic and dish soap. She kept rubbing her forehead like I had given her a migraine. "You made me look like I married someone who hates my family," she said. I said no to a risky financial request. "You made him feel small. He came into our home asking me to take on a risk he wouldn't explain. He was embarrassed. So was I, every time he treated me like an ATM with a chair at dinner." She turned on me. "Don't say that." "Why?" "Because it sounds bad. Because it makes you sound bitter." I closed the refrigerator and looked at her. "I am bitter." That was the first honest sentence I had said out loud in a long time. The next morning, Lauren was cold. Not explosive, just cold. She answered in short sentences, left her coffee half finished, and kissed the side of my cheek before leaving like it was an obligation she had almost forgotten. I told myself to give it a day. Then I noticed the transfers. I handled most of the bills because I was better at tracking due dates. Lauren had access to everything, but I usually made sure the mortgage, utilities, insurance, and cards were covered. That weekend, I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop and opened our joint checking account. I was trying to figure out why the balance looked lower than it should have. At first, nothing jumped out. Groceries were higher. Utilities had gone up a little. Normal life is expensive, and I knew that. But then I saw a transfer labeled household reimbursement for $400. A week later, miscellaneous family for $600. Then shared expense for $350. Then temporary transfer. The labels were vague enough to look harmless if you weren't paying attention. But I was paying attention now. I called Lauren into the kitchen. "What was this transfer for last Thursday?" I asked, turning the laptop slightly. She stood behind the chair instead of sitting. "I don't remember. Probably groceries or something for the house." $600? We bought a lot that week. I do the grocery shopping. Her face changed for half a second. Not guilt exactly. Irritation that I hadn't noticed. "Then maybe it was something for my mom," she said. "Why are you interrogating me?" "I'm asking about joint money. You never cared this much before." That was true in the worst possible way. I had cared. I had just trusted her. Over the next few days, Ryan started acting strangely confident for a man I had just refused to help. He sent jokes into the family chat about how some people needed a heart upgrade. Diane posted a picture of an old family dinner with the caption, "When family shows up, everything works out." Lauren responded with a heart. I didn't reply. Then Ryan texted me directly the afternoon before Sunday dinner. "Just don't turn this into one of your lectures tonight." I stared at the message for a long time. I wrote back, "What exactly am I walking into?" He didn't answer. Lauren was tense while getting ready. She tried on 3 sweaters, even though it was just dinner at her parents' house. She folded and refolded the scarf she had decided not to wear. In the car, she kept tapping her thumb against her phone screen. "Is there something I need to know before we get there?" I asked. She looked out the window. "Just please don't be difficult." "About what?" "About everything." That answer sat between us for the rest of the drive. Dinner started normally enough, which somehow made it worse. Diane had made roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and the same salad she always claimed was just thrown together, even though it had 3 kinds of nuts in it. Patrick asked me if I wanted coffee after dinner. Lauren sat beside me, folding the corner of her napkin until it started to tear. Ryan was already there when we arrived. He clapped me on the shoulder too hard and said, "There he is, the man with the plan." I stepped away from his hand and said, "Ryan." Throughout dinner, he made small comments. Nothing big enough to make the table stop, just enough to set the tone. When Diane mentioned how hard the year had been for him, Ryan sighed like a man carrying a burden nobody else understood. Diane refilled her wine instead of looking at me. Some people forget that family is supposed to be a soft place to land. I set my water glass down. A soft place shouldn't mean a blank check. Ryan smiled at his plate. "Here comes the spreadsheet." Lauren whispered, "Michael." I looked at her. "What?" "Not now." That was always the answer. Not now. Not here. Not in front of them. Not when Ryan is stressed. Not when mom is emotional. Not when dad finally seems relaxed. Not now, which really meant not ever. Ryan leaned back, fork in hand. "You know, Mike, nobody is asking you to be a hero." "Good. We're asking you to act like you married into a family." I did. "Then act like it." Diane gave a soft little sigh, the kind meant to make me feel cruel without anyone having to accuse me directly. Ryan lifted his glass. "You want the seat, Michael? Then act like you're part of this family. Or stop pretending you belong here." The table went quiet enough that I could hear the ice shifting in Patrick's glass. I turned to Lauren. I expected anger, embarrassment, something. Anything that said she understood there was a line and Ryan had crossed it. Instead, she gave Ryan the smallest nod. Then she looked at me and said, "You're making this harder than it needs to be." It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. That made it worse. It told me she hadn't been caught off guard. She had been waiting for that moment. I said, "I was waiting for my wife to tell you that was out of line." Lauren's face tightened. "You never really understood my family." I nodded once. Then I took off my wedding ring. Nobody gasped. No one stood up. Diane's mouth opened a little, then closed. Ryan's smirk flickered, like he couldn't decide whether to make a joke. I set the ring beside my plate. "You're right," I said. "I don't belong at this table. After tonight, neither does my money." Lauren whispered, "Michael, don't." But I was already standing. Ryan scoffed. "Oh, come on. You're really doing the wounded husband routine." I looked at him. "No, I'm done rehearsing it." Then I left. The drive away was quiet except for my phone lighting up in the cup holder. Lauren called 3 times. Ryan texted twice. Diane sent one message that just said, "You need to come back and fix this." I pulled into a parking lot a few blocks away and sat there with both hands on the steering wheel. My ring was still on Diane's dining room table. My chest felt hollow, not because I regretted leaving, but because part of me understood that I hadn't walked out of one dinner. I had walked out of years of pretending. Lauren texted, "You humiliated me." I replied, "No, I stopped participating." Then I drove home. I didn't sleep that night. I changed out of my dinner clothes, sat at the kitchen table, and opened the bank statements again. My phone kept lighting up beside the laptop. I turned it face down. This time, I didn't just look at the current month. I downloaded everything I could find: statements, transfer confirmations, credit card summaries, insurance charges, and phone line payments. I made a folder on my computer and labeled it with the date. Then I started matching transfers. It wasn't one mistake. It was a system. $300 labeled household reimbursement had gone to Ryan 2 days after Lauren told me our utility bill was higher than usual. $500 labeled family expense had gone out the same week. She said Diane needed help with a medical copay, but Diane had never mentioned it. A recurring phone payment I thought was Lauren's old line was actually Ryan's. A car insurance add-on tied to his name had been buried inside our monthly payment for almost a year. Then I found the larger transfers. They had started small, then grown, for $100, $600, $800, $1,000. Always spaced far enough apart to avoid looking like a pattern unless someone was willing to make a spreadsheet. So I made one. At 2:13 in the morning, Lauren came home. I heard her key in the lock, then the soft click of the door closing. She stopped when she saw me at the table. "You left your ring," she said. "I know." She placed it on the counter, not near me. My mom was crying. I'm sure she was. Ryan feels attacked. That almost made me laugh, but I was too tired. I turned the laptop toward her. "How many times did you send him money from our joint account?" Her face went still. "Michael, not tonight." "Yes, tonight." She took off her coat slowly. I was trying to keep everyone from falling apart. "That's not an answer." "He needed help. And you lied to me." "I didn't lie." I clicked one file open. "You labeled transfers as household expenses. Because they were for family. Our household is not your brother's emergency fund." She flinched. "You're being cruel." "No, I'm being accurate." She started crying then, but not the kind of crying that comes from remorse. It was angry crying, cornered crying. "You would have said no," she said. "Yes." So what was I supposed to do? Accept my answer. She wiped her face. "You don't understand what it's like to have everyone looking at you like you're the one who broke the family." I stared at her. "Lauren, you broke our marriage to keep them from looking at you." She looked away. That was the first moment I knew we might not come back from this. I slept in the guest room. In the morning, I called my sister, Natalie. Natalie is 42 and has never liked Ryan. She tried, mostly for my sake, but after the third Thanksgiving where he made a joke about me being the responsible one who makes the rest of us look bad, she told me in the driveway, "That man resents every adult in the room." When she answered, I didn't even say hello. I said, "I think Lauren has been giving Ryan our money behind my back." There was a pause. Then Natalie said, "Okay, don't yell. Don't threaten. Don't do anything you can't explain calmly later. Document everything." I found statements. Save them somewhere she can't delete them. I feel like an idiot. "You trusted your wife. That's not stupid. Ignoring what you found would be stupid." I needed that sentence more than I wanted to admit. Natalie told me to write down a timeline while I still remembered the conversations. Dates, amounts, explanations Lauren had given, comments Ryan had made. She told me not to empty the joint account, not to cancel anything that would hurt my legal position, and not to get into a shouting match over text. "Protect yourself," she said. "Not because you hate her, because she stopped protecting you." So that is what I did. I changed my direct deposit to an individual account that had existed for years, but mostly sat unused. I removed Lauren as an authorized user from personal cards that were only in my name. I changed the passwords on my email, banking logins, cloud storage, and phone plan. I downloaded balances and saved screenshots with dates visible. I canceled non-essential auto payments that were clearly tied to Ryan, a streaming service, a storage fee, the extra phone line, and the car insurance add-on, once I confirmed I could do it without creating a coverage issue for Lauren and me. I didn't drain our joint account. I didn't hide money. I didn't threaten Lauren. I sent her an email. Lauren, before we discuss our marriage, I need a complete list of every transfer to Ryan or any family member from our joint funds, every recurring expense connected to Ryan, and every time a household expense label was used for money that did not go to our household. I also need all future financial communication in writing until trust is rebuilt. Michael. She called within 2 minutes. I didn't answer. She texted, "Are you seriously emailing me like I'm a stranger?" I replied, "I'm creating a record because you had joint money from me." Ryan texted me an hour later. "You really closed the cards? Are you serious?" I stared at that message longer than any of the bank statements. I wrote back, "You called me a wallet. I closed it." He replied, "What are you talking about?" I didn't answer because, at that point, I didn't know exactly what I was talking about. I only knew he sounded too specific about the cards, too angry about access he shouldn't have assumed he had. That afternoon, I found the messages. Lauren and I used an old tablet in the kitchen for recipes, calendars, and video calls with family. It was logged into her messages. I wasn't snooping through years of her life. I was looking for a receipt from Diane because Lauren had claimed one of the transfers was connected to her mother. I searched Ryan and transfer. What came up made my stomach turn. There were messages from the week before the dinner. Lauren, he's digging in because he hates feeling used. Ryan, then stop making it about money. Make it about family. Lauren, Mom can say something first. He hates looking like the bad guy. Ryan, the wallet with a wedding ring always folds eventually. Lauren, don't call him that. Ryan, why? It's accurate. Lauren, just don't say it at dinner. I sat there in the kitchen with the tablet in my hands and felt something cold settle in me. She hadn't defended me in private. She had managed the insult. There were more. Lauren, if everyone leans on him at once, he'll calm down later. Ryan, good. I'm tired of begging some guy who married in. Lauren, he'll be mad for a day. Then he'll want things normal. Ryan, normal means he pays and stops acting like dad. I took screenshots. I saved them with the dates visible. I sent them to myself. Then I put the tablet back exactly where it had been and stood in the kitchen for a full minute, staring at the coffee creamer I had put at the front of the fridge that morning without thinking. That small habit broke me more than the messages did. I had spent years making Lauren's mornings easier while she was helping her brother plan ways to corner me in front of her family. That evening, I met with a legal consultant named Marcia. Natalie had given me her number. Marcia was in her late 50s, calm in a way that made panic feel childish. She didn't tell me to divorce Lauren. She didn't tell me to forgive her, either. She looked at the documents, asked practical questions, and wrote things down on a yellow legal pad. Do not make threats, she said. Make records. I'm not trying to steal anything. Good. Don't. Shared funds are shared funds. Your goal is not revenge. Your goal is clarity, protection, and a defensible timeline. She used our money behind my back. Yes, and you need to respond in a way that a calm person can understand 6 months from now. I rubbed my face. I took off my ring at dinner. Marcia looked over her glasses. That is emotional. Canceling unauthorized access and documenting hidden transfers is practical. Keep the two separate. Before I left, she said something I wrote down on my phone. Protecting yourself is not the same thing as punishing someone. I repeated that to myself in the car. By then, Lauren and Ryan had started controlling the story. The family group chat, which had once been full of food pictures and birthdays, became a courtroom where I was the defendant and no one had asked for evidence. Diane wrote, I hope you are proud of what you were doing to Lauren. One cousin wrote, this isn't who we thought you were. Someone else wrote, you need to fix this before it gets worse. Ryan wrote, nobody is perfect, but walking out on family says a lot. Lauren didn't write anything in the group chat. That bothered me almost as much as if she had. She let the story grow around her. I replied once. Ask Lauren what happened before you decide what I did. Diane called immediately. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was 43 seconds long. Michael, this is not how family handles problems. Ryan has had a hard year. Lauren is devastated. You could have handled this privately. Family is supposed to forgive. Call me. I played it twice, not because I needed to hear it, but because I wanted to remember exactly how easily everyone demanded privacy from the person being lied about. Lauren came to the guest room door that night. Can we talk like married people? She asked. I was sitting on the bed with my laptop open and the documents in folders. Yes. Start with the transfers. She folded her arms. You're punishing everyone. Tell me how many times you sent him money. That is not the point. That is exactly the point. She came into the room and sat on the edge of the chair by the window. She looked exhausted. For a second, I could see the woman I married, not because she looked innocent, but because she looked overwhelmed and human. That made it harder. I didn't tell you because I knew how you would react, she said. How would I react? You'd say no. Because we couldn't afford to keep covering him. He's my brother. I know. You've made that the only relationship that matters. Her eyes filled again. That's not fair. Neither was letting him humiliate me while you nodded. She looked down. I said, did you plan that dinner? No. I waited. She pressed her lips together. I said, Lauren. Her voice dropped. I thought if you heard him out with everyone there, you'd understand. That isn't hearing him out. That's pressure. I didn't know how else to handle it. You could have chosen your husband. I was trying to keep everyone from falling apart. No, I said. You were trying to make sure I was the only thing holding everyone together. She didn't have an answer for that. 2 days later, Ryan found out more of the payments had been cut off. I knew because my phone started buzzing while I was at the grocery store. I was standing in front of the eggs, of all things, comparing prices like my life hadn't turned into a mess. Ryan, you really canceled the storage payment? Ryan, that had my stuff in it. Ryan, you could have warned me. Ryan, you want to burn the whole family over a few transfers? I put a carton of eggs in the cart and typed back, you had months of warnings. You called them lectures. He replied, you're acting like a few transfers make you a victim. I wrote, no, the lying did. Then I blocked him from texting me directly. Not because I was hiding, but because I was done letting him use access as a weapon. Lauren tried another route. She asked for a small family meeting to clear the air. Her words, not mine. I knew what that meant. It meant I was supposed to sit in a room where everyone framed the problem as my reaction instead of their behavior. It meant Diane would cry softly, Ryan would joke, Patrick would avoid eye contact, and Lauren would ask me not to make things bigger. But this time I agreed. I told Lauren in writing that I would attend one conversation with her parents and Ryan, and that I would bring documentation because false claims had already been made in the family chat. She responded, please don't make this a trial. I wrote back, then don't make me the defendant. The meeting happened on a Saturday afternoon at Diane and Patrick's house. Same dining room, same table, different version of me. I wore my ring in my pocket, not on my finger. I didn't throw it away. I didn't leave it behind again. I kept it because 8 years of marriage meant something to me, even if Lauren had treated it like cover for her choices. When I walked in with a folder under my arm, Ryan laughed. See, he said, this is what I mean. He brings paperwork to a family conversation. I put the folder on the table and sat down. Because your version of family depends on nobody keeping receipts. Diane closed her eyes like I had slapped her. Michael, please. Patrick looked at the folder, then at Lauren. Lauren was pale. Diane started first. Of course she did. Nobody handled this perfectly, she said, her hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't drunk from. But walking out, canceling things, embarrassing Lauren, cutting off Ryan without warning. Without warning? I asked. Ryan leaned back. Here we go. I looked at him. No jokes today. He smirked. Or what? Patrick surprised me by saying, Ryan. Enough. Ryan's smirk slipped. Lauren sat across from me with her hands in her lap. She looked smaller than usual. I wanted that to move me. Part of it did. But I had learned that feeling sorry for someone didn't require handing them control of the facts. Diane continued, softer now. Family is supposed to forgive. I opened the folder. Before anyone calls me ungrateful again, I said, I want you to understand what I was asked to be grateful for. I laid out the first page, a simple timeline. Dates, amounts, labels, where the money went. Over the past several months, joint funds were transferred to Ryan under labels like household reimbursement, miscellaneous family, temporary transfer, and shared expense. These were not household expenses. They were not discussed with me. Some happened after Lauren gave me false explanations for why our expenses were higher. Lauren whispered, Michael. I kept going. I placed the phone bill summary on the table. This extra line was Ryan's. Then the insurance page. This add-on was Ryan's. Then the storage fee. This was Ryan's. Ryan scoffed. You're acting like I robbed you. I looked at him. You accepted money while mocking me for paying it. He opened his mouth. I slid the screenshots across the table. Lauren's face crumpled before anyone else read them. Diane picked up the first page. Her eyes moved left to right. Patrick leaned closer. Ryan said, "Those are private messages." I said, "So were the transfers from my marriage." Patrick read out loud, slowly, like he didn't want the words to be real. "The wallet with a wedding ring always folds eventually." The room went dead quiet. Ryan shrugged, but it was weak. "It was a joke." "No more jokes," Patrick said. His voice was low. "Answer the question." Ryan looked at him. "What question?" Patrick tapped the bank timeline. "How much of this did you pay back?" Ryan shifted in his chair. "That's not the issue." "It is now." Diane still held the screenshot. Her mouth had gone tight. For years, she had been able to turn Ryan's behavior into hardship and my boundaries into cruelty. But the words were right there in her hand. Not my interpretation, not my bitterness. His words. Lauren's words. Lauren started crying. At first, she said, "You're taking it out of context." I said nothing. Then she said, "I told him not to call you that." I said, "You told him not to say it at dinner." She covered her face. Diane turned toward her. "Lauren, did you know about all of this?" Lauren didn't answer. Patrick said, "Did you?" Lauren lowered her hands. "I knew about the transfers." Diane inhaled sharply. Lauren looked at me. "I thought you'd calm down." I said, "You mistook my patience for permission." She shook her head. I didn't know how else to handle it. "Handle what?" I asked. "Your brother's choices? Your mother's expectations? Or your fear that saying no would make you look disloyal?" Her face flushed. "That is not fair." "It is exactly fair." Ryan tried to jump in. "This is insane. You're all acting like he's some saint because he printed out bank statements." Natalie had told me not to get pulled into insults, so I didn't. I turned another page around. These are unpaid repayment promises Ryan made in texts. These are the dates I asked. These are the excuses. And these are the family messages after Sunday dinner where I was accused of abandoning the family without anyone asking what happened first. Diane looked down. One of Lauren's cousins, who had come because Diane said there should be another reasonable voice, sat quietly at the far end of the table. She had been one of the people who texted, "This isn't who we thought you were." Now she wouldn't meet my eyes. I was not there to humiliate anyone. I know how that sounds, considering I brought a folder like evidence. But I had been humiliated without facts. I was not going to defend myself with feelings when they had already decided my feelings were the problem. "I am not refusing family," I said. "I am refusing another lie." Lauren cried harder. "Please don't make this bigger than it already is." "It is already this big. I'm just done pretending it's small." Patrick leaned back in his chair and rubbed his jaw. He looked older than he had 5 minutes earlier. Diane spoke carefully. "Michael, I didn't know about the messages." "I believe you. I didn't know Lauren was sending that much." "I believe that too." Ryan said, "Mom." Diane held up one hand without looking at him. It was the first time I had ever seen her stop protecting him before protecting the family image. Patrick looked directly at Ryan. "Where did the money go?" Ryan stared at the table. "Bills." "What bills?" "Just bills. Specific ones." Ryan's face hardened. "Why am I the only one being interrogated?" Patrick said, "Because you took the money." "And Lauren sent it," Ryan shot back. Lauren flinched like he had shoved her. There it was. The loyalty she had been so afraid to betray turned on her the moment Ryan needed cover. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But I remembered the message. He'll calm down later. He'll want things normal. Normal meant I paid. Normal meant I stayed quiet. Normal meant Ryan got to resent me while spending money from my marriage. I closed the folder halfway. "These are my conditions," I said. Lauren looked up, desperate. "Conditions?" "Yes. For any chance of repairing this." Diane opened her mouth, but Patrick said, "Let him speak." I looked at Lauren, not the room. "First, complete financial transparency. Every account, every transfer, every recurring charge connected to Ryan or anyone else. Second, you correct the story publicly to the family members who were told I walked out over one uncomfortable dinner. Third, Ryan gets no access to our money, our accounts, our cards, or anything tied to my name. Fourth, marriage counseling, scheduled and attended, not just promised. Fifth, we proceed with a legal separation while we figure out whether there is anything left to rebuild. Lauren's face collapsed. A separation? Yes. You're choosing money over family. I had heard that sentence in different forms for years. From Diane. From Ryan. From Lauren. It had been the leash they kept handing me, waiting for me to clip it onto myself. No, I said. Respect matters more than access to my money. Lauren whispered, I'm your wife. And I was your husband when you helped your brother corner me. She cried into her hands. Ryan muttered, This is ridiculous. Patrick turned to him. You should leave. Ryan looked stunned. What? Diane didn't stop it. Patrick stood. You heard me. Ryan shoved his chair back. Unbelievable. He gets to walk in with paperwork and suddenly I'm the problem. I said, You were the problem when you thought my silence was included with the transfers. For once, nobody laughed with him. Nobody softened it. Nobody rescued him from the sentence hanging in the room. Ryan left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the glass in the cabinet. Diane closed her eyes. Lauren kept crying. Patrick sat back down and looked at me. I'm sorry. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't fix anything. But it was the first clean sentence anyone in that family had given me in a long time. A few relatives apologized over the next week. Not everyone. Some stayed quiet. One cousin sent a long message about how she didn't know the full situation and hoped we could all heal. I didn't respond to the healing part. I just wrote, Thank you for acknowledging it. Lauren did send the correction. It was shorter than I wanted but clearer than I expected. She wrote in the family chat that I had not walked out simply because Ryan criticized me, that she had hidden transfers to Ryan from our joint account, and that the dinner had been unfairly used to pressure me. She didn't include every detail. She didn't mention wallet with a wedding ring. I didn't force her to. The people who needed to see it had seen it. Ryan left the group chat 10 minutes later. Diane called me 2 days after the meeting. I answered because Patrick had texted first and asked if I would consider taking the call. Diane sounded smaller than usual. I should not have said you needed to fix it, she said. No, you shouldn't have. She was quiet. Then she said, I was trying to keep peace. I looked across the apartment I had rented for the short term, at the small dish on the counter where my ring Saturday, so was I. That's how it got this far. She cried a little. I didn't comfort her the way I would have before. I was not cruel. I just didn't pick up the emotional bill. Lauren and I started the separation process. Practical things came first. Documented balances, changed passwords, written agreements about bills. Counseling was scheduled, though I told her I would not use counseling as a place for her to perform regret without accountability. She signed paperwork acknowledging the transfers we had identified so far. Marcia reviewed everything before I agreed to anything. Ryan tried to get around the cutoff twice. Once, he emailed me a long message that started with man to man and ended with him calling me insecure. I forwarded it to Lauren and Marcia without replying. Another time, he asked Diane to ask Lauren to ask me about one last payment for the storage unit. Lauren told him no. I don't know whether she did it because she finally understood or because she knew I would find out. At that point, the reason mattered less than the boundary. The first counseling session was uncomfortable. Lauren cried. I expected that. She said she felt trapped between her husband and her family. I said, You weren't trapped. You chose a side and asked me to fund it. The counselor asked Lauren what she thought would happen if she had told Ryan no. Lauren sat there for a long time. Then she said, They would have been disappointed in me. I said, So you made sure I was disappointed instead. She didn't deny it. That was the closest thing to honesty I had heard from her since this started. I didn't move back home. I took essentials, the old coffee mug I liked, my documents, and a few framed pictures that didn't feel like lies. Lauren stayed in the house while we worked through the legal and counseling process because Marcia said not to make impulsive moves that created bigger problems. The ring stayed in the dish at my apartment. Some mornings I looked at it while making coffee and felt grief. Other mornings I felt relief. Most mornings, it was both. I didn't stop loving Lauren in one night. I stopped confusing love with being volunteered for disrespect. That was the hardest part to explain to people who wanted a clean villain and a clean ending. Lauren was not a monster. She was scared, avoidant, and so desperate to be approved by her family that she treated my trust like something she could spend quietly and apologize for later. Ryan was not some criminal mastermind. He was entitled, resentful, and very comfortable using jokes to hide the fact that he had no intention of being accountable. Diane was not evil. She just found it easier to call me unforgiving than to admit her son had learned exactly how to make guilt profitable. But believable reasons don't erase real harm. The last conversation I had with Ryan wasn't really a conversation. He called from a number I didn't recognize. I answered because I was expecting a call from a contractor. "You happy now?" he said. I almost hung up, but I wanted to hear what he thought happiness sounded like. "No," I said. "You got everyone looking at me like I'm some loser. I didn't make you take the money. You didn't have to put it all out there. You put me on trial first." He scoffed. "You always thought you were better than us." "No," I said. "I thought if I was patient enough, eventually you'd treat me like one of you. And now I'm glad I don't have to earn that anymore." I hung up and blocked the number. Lauren and I are still separated. That is the clear truth, not the dramatic one. We attend counseling. She has given me access to the financial records I asked for. She corrected the story. She cut Ryan off from anything connected to our household. Those were requirements, not rewards. Whether the marriage survives is not something I am deciding based on tears, family pressure, or one good week. It depends on whether Lauren can become the kind of partner who protects the marriage when it costs her approval, not only when it costs her nothing. As for Ryan, the money stopped. The jokes stopped landing. Patrick started asking him direct questions. Diane still struggles not to rescue him. But now when she says, "Ryan has had a hard year," someone usually says, "Ryan has had a hard decade." I used to think acceptance was something I had to earn by being useful, quiet, and endlessly understanding. I used to think being patient made me a good husband. Now I know patience without boundaries just teaches people how cheaply they can buy your silence. The ring is still in the dish. I have not thrown it away. I have not put it back on. That feels honest. And for the first time in years, my money, my name, and my dignity are no longer available for family manipulation. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.